G'day everyone, I'm Dave, and today we're going to be talking about power tool cord replacement. This is one of the most common problems we see on power cords a lot. People either cut the cord or just from abuse wiggling it at the end, they start falling apart. First thing we're going to do is just open it up, and before we even get into that, I'm just going to cut the cord off just to get out of the way because we know we're replacing the cord. Just going to pop the cover off. We already loosened up the screws, they're a little bit rusted. And inside, of course, more rust. So here's your cord coming through with your rubber grommet. We're just going to cut the wires off of that too. So we'll just pull off the rubber grommet. And there's our black and our white. It's only a 2-prong cord. If it was 3-prong, of course, you'd have your 3 wires coming in. With the old grommet, we just cut that completely flush on both sides. And we can take that to a drill press, and I can drill right through the center and reuse this with a different cord. This is a cord I pulled off another tool. Again, it's 2-prong. It's got the rubber grommet. We're just going to double check that the grommet will work with this particular saw. If it doesn't, it's just rubber. You can actually cut away a little bit or file a little bit away. But we'll just double check that, make sure it's going to close up properly. And it is. So if we're looking at the switch, these wires actually just push in and they're locked in. The simple solution to remove those wires without having to open up the switch is using a needle. So if we look at our black wire, again, I'm just going to take a pair of pliers to hold the needle. I'm going to come in between the two. And it might take you a couple tries. We'll just push down, try to feel for that spring. There we are in the first try. The one thing you have to check is to make sure you have long enough wires to go all the way in. In this case, we actually do. But I'm just going to show you how you can strip the housing off this. So we'll go to the full extreme of, let's say, cutting that right off and start from scratch. The best you can do for that is lay it out, have an idea of roughly how much wire you need, find your spot, take your knife, and just basically go around the wire and just score it. And as we flex it, you can start seeing there, it's starting to break. Because the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to cut into those wires. Sometimes you give it a little twist and a bit more flex. Once we have that, just pull that right off. A lot of the old wires, depending on where you get it, has string material inside. Those we just cut off flush to the outside housing. Next step, of course, before you go any farther, make sure you have that grommet on, and we'll start looking at our length. Once we have that done, next thing to do is strip the wire. There's your common stripper that a lot of people use. You have more automated ones that'll do the job and pull everything apart in one shot. Both do the same job. So we go right down to, in this case, all I have, there's 18 way over to the right. I'm just going to go slightly larger to 16. And I'm just going to strip. Do the same thing with the white. First thing we can do is twist it all up. And then what we're going to do is put some solder on that to make sure it actually goes in. Anytime you're dealing with soldering, even if you're dealing with a flux solder, it's always good to just dip that wire in flux as well. It just makes the process a little easier. I'll just put that on the wire and you'll see the flux starting to melt. Once it looks good, pull that aside, set everything aside to cool down. For the black, it only takes a few seconds to cool down. What we do is just cut that down to the proper length to fit the switch. Cut it. We'll take the black, and just as you've seen with our taking apart switch, we'll just actually push that right inside until it locks, and then we'll double check it, make sure it's solid. For the white wire, we got a couple options. We're going to take a different approach here. Just use a little bit of heat shrink. You want something that has a bit of movement, and we want to move that as far away from the joint as we can so that the heat doesn't affect it and doesn't start shrinking. The best thing to do is crisscross the two together and then wrap them over each other. So that way they won't pull apart. And same thing as before, come from underneath the wire to heat up the wire, put a little bit of solder on the bottom just to give better connectivity, and then start soldering on the top half of the wire. Once we have a good connection, we'll let that cool down. Once the joint is fairly cool to the touch, we can then take our heat shrink and just slide it over top of the two of them. And then we can take our soldering iron or our heat gun without touching it, just come close to it and let the radiant heat shrink that. Once we have that shrunk, we'll just double check to make sure it has shrunk, make sure there's no openings anywhere. give that a good tug to make sure it's good. And then we'll just put that down back inside. Just before we button it all up, I'm just going to do a quick test just to make sure it works. It's not something I would highly recommend doing, but it's worth doing just so you can have a quick look to see how it operates. So I'll have to hold down the front nose gearing, and we'll just turn that on for a second. Now you notice there's a lot of sparking here on the commutator, but for now, our goal today was to change the cord. We did that. It's just a matter of now closing it back up, screwing it all back together, and we're done. Hopefully you found this video helpful and you have the confidence to do your own cords. For more tools, tips, tricks, and teardowns, please subscribe and watch our other videos. And thanks for watching.